Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So today we'll be doing chapter 2 from section 1. So this is 1.2 classification of businesses from the CIE specification of IGCSE business studies. Okay, so let's get straight into it. Firstly, we're going to look at the stages of economic activity. Okay, so there's three main stages. The first one is the primary sector. The primary sector extracts and uses natural resources of the earth to produce raw materials used by other businesses. So the primary sector basically has to do with the raw materials which are used to create other goods and products. Okay, so examples may be coal mining, farming, and fishing. The second sector is the secondary sector, and this industry manufactures goods using the raw materials which were provided by the primary sector. Okay, so the raw materials that we got here, that's what we're going to use in the secondary sector to manufacture goods. Okay, now whatever goods that you made, the goods that you made in the secondary sector are going to be sold by the tertiary sector, and the tertiary sector is your third sector that we need to learn about. So in the tertiary sector, the industry provides services to consumers and the other sectors of industry. Okay, before we go into the examples of this, the examples of secondary sector is car manufacturing and computer assembly, and tertiary sector is banking, insurance, transport, and retail shops. So you'll notice that all of these are services and all of these are just manufacturing businesses. Okay, now the importance of economic sectors. The three sectors are compared by two methods. Okay, there can be two ways that you compare how important or significant a sector is within a country. So the first way you can compare it is by looking at the percentage of the country's total number of workers employed in each sector. So for example, if we're going to look at UK, let's make a table, and let's say there's primary, secondary, and tertiary, and these are the three sectors, right? So maybe a report says that 60% of workers work in the tertiary sector, 30% are in the secondary, and 10% are in the primary. So according to the percentage of the country's total number of workers, we can say that the tertiary sector is the most prominent in the country UK. Okay, so this is one way in which you can compare the three sectors. Okay, another way in which you can compare it is by looking at the value of output of goods and services and the proportion this is to the total national output. Okay, so that is your second way. Now moving on, we're going to look at developing countries and developed countries. So developing countries are basically countries which specialize in the primary sector. Okay, so developing countries are going to have a lot of coal mining businesses, a lot of businesses where they just extract raw materials from the earth. Okay, and that's why I've put a plus here, which means that there's a lot of primary sector and there is minus or very little of the secondary and tertiary sector. Okay, so those are developing countries. Now developed countries on the other hand have a lot of secondary and tertiary sectors. Okay, which means that there's a lot of manufacturing businesses, there's a lot of services and retail shops and luxury in developed countries. However, there are very little primary sectors. Okay, there are very little employees who work in the primary sector. Okay, now next we're going to look at the changes in economic sectors. So reasons for changes in economic sectors. So the main reason for there to be a shift in the number of people working in each sector is due to three main factors. Okay, firstly, the primary products get depleted, so then the primary sector declines. So suppose it's a country like in Africa, there's a lot of mining, right? So or maybe farming. So if the number of mines decrease, or if the number of minerals in those mines get depleted, then obviously there's going to be a decline in the primary sector. Okay, next, developed economies decline due to competition from newly industrialized countries like Brazil, China, and India. So basically the second point is that if there's more competition okay, if the competition increases due to newly developed countries, then your economy is going to decline. The secondary and the tertiary sector in these countries are going to decline due to the new competition, like Brazil, China, India. These are just examples, okay? And the third thing is when lifestyle standards increase in a country, the country shifts to the tertiary sector. So for example, if it's a developed country, okay, suppose it's country X, and basically the lifestyle of people have increased, or the living standards have increased, so there's going to be a lot of need for luxury products, okay? So these can be like fast cars or spas, amusement parks, right? So people would want to spend their money on all of these things, okay? Which is why the number of tertiary sector businesses are going to increase, and hence the country is going to shift to tertiary sector. But this opposed to another country, sorry, let's say country Y. Suppose country Y is a poor country. Are they going to need businesses like this, or are they going to need a lot more hospitals and services which help them for their basic needs, right? Which is why these countries like country Y would specialize in the secondary or the primary sectors. They don't need luxurious products, okay? So that those are the reasons for changes in economic sectors. Now we're going to look at the definition of a really important term, and that is deindustrialization, okay? Deindustrialization occurs when there is a decline in importance of secondary manufacturing sector of industry in a country, okay? Basically, deindustrialization in simple terms is when your secondary sector declines, and the secondary and your primary sector is declining, okay? But mainly you can just say it's a decline in importance of secondary sector. All right, now moving on, we have mixed economy, and this is one of the last topics in this chapter. Mixed economy is basically when there is a combination of both the private and the public sector in a country, okay? So mixed economy, nearly every country in the world right now has a mixed economy with the private sector and a public sector together existing at once. So when we look at private sectors are businesses which are not owned by the government, okay? They are not owned by the government. They decide what to produce, how to produce it, and set prices, usually aiming for profit. Some government regulations may apply though, okay? So private sector is solely for profit. They work for profit and for more money, and they're not owned by the government, and they can decide what to produce, why they're producing it, how they produce it, and how much cost to how much they price the products, okay? And then the next sector is the public sector, and this is owned by the government, okay? It's government owned businesses and organizations that provide goods and services, often funded by taxes. So the taxes that day-to-day citizens pay is what's used to fund these businesses and organizations in the public sector. Some goods and services are provided free of charge to the consumer, such as state health and educational services, okay? So that is an advantage of public sector, the fact that some of these services are free of cost. Now moving on, we have the examples of public sector. Examples may be health, education, defense, public transport, water supply, and electricity supply. So all of these are government owned, okay? Now lastly, we have the recent changes in mixed economies. What are the recent changes that countries are facing right now? So governments have shifted the balance between private and public sectors by privatizing public sector businesses. This includes selling government controlled entities like water, electricity, and public transport to private companies. So what governments are doing right now is that they're turning the businesses in the public sector, okay, to private sector businesses. And this process is known as privatization, okay? Privatization is when the government shifts the public sector businesses into private sector businesses. Okay. The advantages of privatization is the fact that private sector businesses are seen as more efficient due to the profit driven goals. So, private businesses, as we've learned before, obviously want more profit. So, that's what motivates them. Okay. Next, cost control and greater capital. So, private businesses may have more money to invest on capital, which will help the business to thrive. Plus, they're gonna look at how they can control cost and use and spend their money in a more efficient way. Okay, and lastly, the competition improves product quality. Private businesses obviously want profit, like I said before, and uh, because of the competition around them, they're also going to feel more motivated to improve product quality and win customers over the other competition in the industry. Okay, now the disadvantages of privatization is that private businesses may cut jobs to reduce costs. Okay, people are going to lose jobs sometimes. And lastly, there's less focus on the social objectives. So when a government gives their business to the private sector, they're only looking at the profit, right? The private sector businesses only look at profit. What if, in the process of trying to be more profitable, they overlook the social objectives like the environment or the well being of their employees, right? So, that is one of the problems with privatization. So, that's it for this chapter, and I hope you enjoyed the video. And yeah, thank you for watching. If you liked the video, please do not forget to like and subscribe. And yeah, that's it for me.